Welcome back to the 365 Driven podcast. Today we've got a great guest that I've really enjoyed his content over a period of years. He's a very deep thinker, a very philosophical guy. He's always talking about fulfillment and happiness and pursuing your purpose and aligning your message and all these things that most people I think really struggle with, or maybe they don't even understand what we're talking about on that intro. But we're going to get into that. His name's Jesse Elder. He's a brilliant speaker. He speaks at different events all around the world. He's kind of like a mindset coach, a life coach, a business coach, all wrapped into one. And he's also got a background in martial arts. We'll get into that too, because I know it brought a lot of value to his life. And I can't wait for you guys to get to know him on this show. So Jesse, welcome to the show, brother.
That's a hell of an intro, Tony. That's a lot to live up to, man.
There you go. There you go. Man, I want to start back when your childhood, because you and my wife have something in common. She grew up in a family of seven herself. She was kind of the middle child. And, what was that like for you?
Yeah, man. It's one of those things like when you're in it, you don't like what else do you know, right? There's nothing to compare it to, so it's just like your childhood. And it wasn't until I was probably in my mid to late 20s that I realized that there was some pretty formative experiences that, while maybe not pleasant or comfortable at the time, it's like it's just raw material. Like we can go back at any time and take the rocks out of the backpack and get some upgrades. And I was the oldest of five, and was born in Austin, grew up in Austin, San Antonio, South Texas. My dad was a school teacher. That's him in this photo way back there. And he did a lot of little odd jobs and stuff when he wasn't teaching. And one of the things that he was really into, and my mom, was a lot of like social justice issues. And this is like way before the modern version of the super woke like
Violent
offendable.
wokeism.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But these were actually peaceful protests,
Right.
the peaceful kind. And so, like, almost every weekend we were out protesting something. It was like no nukes, it was save the whales, all these things.
Hmm.
And again, it's just one of those things. You're in it, so like, what else do you have nothing to compare it to.
Yeah.
And being homeschooled, it was an awesome childhood. And one of the things that happened is he got really involved in helping Central American refugees during the 80s. And there was, thousands of refugees coming up from El Salvador and Guatemala and Nicaragua, and took a job as a director for a halfway house for refugees in the Rio Grande Valley. And it was, obviously illegal to do this, but it was a very principled decision. And one day, my mom comes to me. We were living in this little trailer next to this house that was run by the church, and all the refugees would come through there. And my mom comes to me one day. She says, "Do you know what the word indictment means?" I'm, I do not. And she said, "Well, your father's been indicted." And that began a little over 2 year journey of him getting arrested. He was acquitted. He was very vocal, saying that if this is a crime, then it's a crime of conscience, and I'm going to do what I think is right, regardless of the consequences. He was arrested again. It was a huge deal. Like the federales came at like high noon. It was a movie. It was incredible.
Wow.
Actually, Hollywood came knocking. They wanted to do a movie with Chris Christopherson as my dad, Ricky Schroeder playing me.
Oh, wow.
And
All right.
it was interesting times. And he was convicted. And I remember being in the courtroom in Houston, Texas. And my mom was there, my brothers, my sister had not been born yet. And the foreman of the jury comes out and says, "Your Honor, we, the jury, have reached a verdict, and we find the defendant, Jack Elder, guilty." And I was 10 years old, and I remember doing the math in my head as they're laying down these guilty charges, one count, two count, three count. And each count, because I would eavesdrop on the lawyers in the living room when they'd be talking to my parents, and I had received the impression that every guilty count was 7 years federal. So I'm doing the math in my head. I'm in this courtroom, and all of a sudden I realize I'm never going to see my dad again. And it was one of those moments, and we've all had them, where it's like you grow up instantly. And from that moment, my childhood wasn't the same. I mentally made up the story that I need to take care of my mom and my brothers, and I'm never going to see my dad again. And the universe is weird and perfect. He ended up getting like 5 months in a almost zero security halfway house 3 miles from where we lived in San Antonio. He was at the house every day. He just went back there to sleep. And they let him out a month early if he promised not to tell the press because there was such a political football. And so I often have reflected on that experience as, it's that raw material for like, what do you want it to mean? And I'm sure you've experienced this, and you've seen this in your businesses. You've seen this in people that you've probably mentored and coached and just been a general decent human being for. Yeah. That every single one of us has experiences that contain this memory of pain, and then we reflect on it, and that reflection is painful, and then that actually becomes the new experience. And then a couple of days go by and we think about it again, and there's that zing and you get that tightening in your chest. It's like, oh, that was a traumatic event. And then a couple of days go by and you think about it again, and it feels like we're recalling the original traumatic experience. But the reality is we're only thinking about the last time we thought about it. And so when people say, well, I've had 25 years of struggling with this thing, like, actually, you've had 25 years of practicing struggling with this thing. And not to take away from anybody's pain, but the purpose of pain is to get our attention. It's what we do with that attention that completely determines the story of our lives. And so it's been, it's been a heck of a ride, parsing out this whole human thing.
Yeah, going back age 10 and you're in a courtroom and you're watching your father get convicted of doing something that's ethically the right thing, trying to help people. And you had this dichotomy of thinking like the law is supposed to be on our side, but he's doing the right thing. And there had to be some kind of inner turmoil that you're kind of building in that age that why am I doing the right thing and I'm getting penalized for this? And how am I going to change my life as I grow into young adulthood and choosing to do the right thing if I'm just going to get put in prison for that? So I do agree that that moment that you heard the verdict was very much something that changes your life, whether that was a reduced sentence or not. That moment and probably the few hours, the few days afterwards really changed a lot of the things and the behaviors that you had kind of built up to that point.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really well expressed reflection. And the meaning that came out of that was that like what I learned from that is that you do what's right regardless of the consequences. And it wasn't until years later, when I was starting to understand, that it did create pain and it did create friction and all this. And I confronted my dad about it and I said, that was actually a super fucked up thing that you did. Like, you put other people that we don't even know ahead of our family, and I was angry and I felt abandoned and all this stuff. And like, I'm glad that those experiences happened because it taught me who I wanted to become. And I have none of that anger anymore. And I love you and I forgive you. And we were sitting in his backyard. We're both just crying. It was like awesome. But you're right. That meaning that you create, for me, it ended up just becoming just this radical, permanent fuel source for doing whatever I thought was right. And, growing up without ever having been in a classroom or sitting behind a desk or taking a test, I just never had the experience of someone who I don't really know telling me this is what you have to pay attention to. It was more like, people, I've been asked many times, so you were homeschooled. I'm like, well, it's more like do your chores in the morning and we'll see you at dinner schooled. Plus it was like the 80s, so it's like, kids are tough back then.
Yeah, we're all daredevils, and
that's right. That's right.
So you get into martial arts, I guess, around that age, and was that kind of the violent outlet that you were kind of looking for to kind of use the energy that you had to kind of go in the right direction? I mean, for me, it was around the same age when I took judo. I think I started at 8 or 9 years old, and I did that for a couple of years, and back then Karate Kid was popular, remember, where we saw Daniel-san getting his ass kicked on the movie, and then Mr. Miyagi kind of comes in and saves the day. For all you young listeners that don't know what we're talking about, it's on Netflix. There's a renewal version of it, right? But so we all got this impression like, hey, we're going to go join martial arts so we can kick people's ass because we're violent. I don't know why men in general, especially at younger ages, we're destructive. We like to break shit. We like to test our bodies. We like to do just violent stuff. A lot of us, most of us.
Yes.
And
Yes.
one of the things I learned from judo really the first 2 weeks sucked because you're just a tackling dummy and you're getting thrown to the mat nonstop. You're not learning how to defend. You're not learning how to punch or strike or kick or do anything. You're just getting tossed. And so I remember my mom, she's a Japanese immigrant, so she's very well versed in understanding the martial arts. And I said, Mom, this sucks. Like, all I do is throw me on the mat. Just throw me over. Just throw me and throw me and throw me. And I don't even get to fight back. And she's like, that's part of the training. You got to learn how to fall. You have to learn to get tossed. You learn how to roll out of things without getting hurt. And I said, well, this sucks. I'm not kicking anybody. I'm not beating up anybody. I'm just literally getting beat up. And
Right.
she's like, that's the test. Most people will quit before they make it through that. And so there was
Mm.
a self control moment that I realized that you got to control your temper and in those hostile situations and just be aware and be level headed and be able to operate. And I'm very fortunate I learned that at an early age. And reading some of the things that you've created, I get a sense that you've done a very similar type mindset things that you learned in martial arts at an early age.
Yeah, well, it's. I mean, first of all, great reflection from your mom to say, "Hey, like this is part of it." I mean, and how old were you when that was going on?
I think around 9 years old. Yeah, 10 years
Yeah,
old.
dude, that's
Yeah.
like that's just formative, man. You're not like in the turmoil of puberty yet, but you're not a baby anymore. That's like the sweet spot. And yeah, one of the in my experience, it was less of an outlet for violence because I didn't really feel like we're a very pacifist family. My dad was in Vietnam, never talked about it, and so anything to do with guns, war, violence was like just not part of our reality. And so when I got into martial arts, because of all the stuff that was happening with my dad, it was an amazing outlet. I mean, I would have these insane visualizations as a 9-year old of like, fighting the federal agents that would come and try and arrest my dad, and I would just dream about like kicking their ass. And as I got older, I realized that it was so powerful to have that in a self-contained environment that didn't turn into more negative or harmful behaviors for me or for anybody else. And you really do get to purge and alchemize a lot of those unhealthy, powerful emotions through something physical.
So you get into this and you don't just go in half-ass. You go in and you start becoming really good at it and you're competing and winning tournaments. And I think I read somewhere you were doing some bare knuckle brawling and stuff later in your probably your early 20s and things like that. So what do you think that makes you different where you go into something not just to dabble, but you go all in? Because I've seen this example that you set in a lot of different things that you pursue.
Well, you've done your research, and I think in my experience, it was just a combination of like very, very low self-esteem actually, and not really wanting to like prove myself to anybody else. I just didn't want to feel timid. I didn't want to feel scared. It was super, especially puberty. I just felt so self-conscious about my body because I was skinny. And then, I competed in Taekwondo and did, dozens of tournaments by the time I was 18, 19 years old, second degree black belt. And it was my life. I was teaching full time. And I got absolutely gifted with a baptism in reality when I was 19. I was at this party with the girl that I liked, and that was like a huge accomplishment for me because I was always so shy, could never talk to girls. But now, wow, she's pretty and she likes me and I like her. So we go to this party, and I mean, just picture like Napoleon Dynamite with like a little like longer rocker hair and no beard, and like that's me. I'm just like kind of goofy, totally awesome when I'm teaching and when I'm competing, but off of the mat, like absolute nerd.
Fish out of water, huh?
Totally, totally. So we're at this house party, and I'm talking to her, and I notice there's this guy who's across the room, and he's like staring at me, and I ask her, I'm like, "What's that guy's deal?" And dude, she goes like, "Oh, that's my boyfriend." And I was like devastated because it's like I really like this girl, and now she has a boyfriend. So I'm feeling like rejection. I'm feeling anger. I'm feeling a little concerned. Like this guy, what's he gonna do? And so I'm like, you know what? It was too much for me. I'm like, I'm out. So I leave the party. I'm walking down the driveway, and all of a sudden I get tackled. And next thing you know, I'm on the ground. And the first thought in my mind, this guy's gonna get disqualified. Like that's the first thought
That's
in my
against the
mind.
rules.
Yeah, you don't do that. He's going to get disqualified. And that thought came and went instantly because I'm getting my face punched in. I'm bouncing off the concrete. I'm like, what the fuck? And my skills, like any combat skills that I had, were reduced to like a 4-year-old child. Like I had no ability. And I realized that those techniques that I'd spent 10 years developing and done thousands of times in training, hundreds of times in competition, those techniques were not only worthless in the real world, they were actually worse than worthless because they were clogging my natural instinct. I was trying to remember and I was frozen. I'm getting punched. Luckily, they kind of pulled us apart. We're standing. I'm like flushed with adrenaline, and I'm running through this little moral checklist. I'm like, he started right. If I hit him now, does that make me a bad guy? I'm grappling with this morality, and I ended up deciding to kick him. I round kicked him in the head. He just dropped like a sack of concrete. I jumped over him and bounded like a gazelle back to my car and left. That was such a gift because that night absolutely shattered any illusion that I had that the martial arts that I'd been learning were much more art than they were martial. And man, life is so perfect and so strange. It was exactly at this time, like literally within 2 months, that one of my mentors who lived here in Austin at the time had a very successful martial arts school, and he was flying to Torrance, California to go train with the Gracie brothers. This is like 90, 91. So he's training with the Gracies, and he says, hey, come to Austin. I got something to show you. So I'm like, what? And he's like, lay down. I'm like, what do you mean lay down?
Yeah, I'm
He's
not
like,
into that. You're like, I don't know,
yeah,
bro.
I'm like, I don't know, dude. I trust you, but what is going on? I mean, no, literally nobody had seen grappling.
No,
It's
no.
like high school wrestling was about the extent of it and what
Yeah.
most people saw it. So fast forward through it, he started training me in jujitsu, got me to compete in this wrestling submission tournament in Austin. And I was terrified. I was like, I'm a second degree black belt in Taekwondo, but this, like, I just started like 4 months ago. And he was like, don't be a pussy, like, do it. So I entered and I ended up winning. And then I was obsessed, not because I won, but because I realized this is actually has practical real life, application. And a couple months later, I ended up at this bouncing at this nightclub. And this is a crazy nightclub in San Antonio. It's called Sneakers Nightclub. And it's where bands went to be born and it's where bands went to die. So, like, one night you'd have like Foghat, slow ride, and they're there. And then, like, the next week you'd have this unknown band called Soundgarden would come
Oh
through.
yeah, Chris
And then
Cornell.
Stone
Dang,
Temple
man.
Pilots. People are like, who are
Getting
these guys?
better.
They sound
Good
different.
stuff.
Yeah, man, so cool. So anyway, the club decided to cash in on this brand new phase craze of this Ultimate Fighting Championship. So they literally started having fight nights, Thursday nights. They rolled this wrestling mat out on the dance floor, and there was two signs at the bar. One sign was the drink specials, and one was, hey, if you want to fight, go ahead and sign up. And usually people went in that order. They were
Yeah.
like drink specials. I could fight, and they'd sign up to fight. And I knew that either I have to do this or I have to stop teaching martial arts because I don't know if I can actually fight. I had that one little scrap in a driveway. I don't know if I can do this, and that uncertainty. I think we all have a relationship with fear. For many people, fear is a red light. For for some people, it's a yellow light. For some people, it's a green light. For every successful entrepreneur I know, fear is like the starting pistol. Like
Yep.
it means go. It doesn't mean stop. And I mean, I didn't know that back then. I could just feel inside of me that I was afraid to do this. I have to do it. And so I did, ended up winning 9 fights, lost 2. And it was another beautiful baptism in reality because I realized that, theory is great, but like, what's the result? And I was so blessed to have great coaches and great mentors who, like, literally don't care what you say. You could have duct tape over your mouth and they'll still train you and work with you and respect you because your actions are what matter. And fast forward, when I ended up building a bunch of martial arts schools, ended up selling them in 2013, and then I found myself very accidentally in this coaching space. And I just assumed that everybody was a multi-millionaire because they're on the internet. I grew this, very appreciatively multi-million-dollar martial arts business with no internet. It's like we did everything hand to hand, like fighting hand to hand and marketing hand to hand, like going out, shaking hands, talking to people. So I just assumed that these internet people must be rolling in dough, and I treated them like that. I was like, wow, like I was very curious and respectful. And then come to find out, it's just like everywhere else. There's like 2% of the people that are actually rocking it. There's like 20% that are thinking about it maybe, and then there's like the rest of the people are in the middle somewhere just trying to figure it out. And I was so blessed by my mentors and coaches who would never tolerate anything that sounded good unless it produced a result. And I was flabbergasted when I would see, a huge name on the stage at some marketing conference, and then backstage they were like a completely different person. I was like, who is your mentor? Because my mentors would kill me if I were to pull that shit. And so I'm not throwing anybody under the bus. I get that everybody's on a different place, and everybody attracts who they need to attract, client and provider. But that really led to what has now become a great practice and a great business, because results are the only thing that matter. And even like I work with a lot of coaches, and occasionally we'll have somebody who'll come in to our community and they'll be like, I did 56,000 in sales. And if they're brand new, everybody on the Zoom call is like, oh, here we go. And I'm like, elaborate. And they're like, well, I had 18 sales calls, and we did 56,000, and we collected 12,000 in deposits. I'm like, then time out.
Yeah.
Then you made $12,000.
That's right.
Like, that's fake future money. We don't play that game here. Oh, it's
Marketers,
little
man.
things like that that are just, reality is beautiful. You just got to face it.
Well, I like that you got tested. So many people never get tested in anything. I mean, even a skirmish on the driveway that taught you a lot of different things. And I also like that it reminded me when you're telling me about the story about going in and Taekwondo, and street fighting rules didn't apply, and you're doing the bar thing. It reminded me of the early days of the UFC when nobody really knew if Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was dominant or not.
Right.
Like it
Dude,
was,
you remember that?
it was like Street Fighter, the video game.
6'2",
There's no
176
weight
pounds.
class.
Like,
You had guys that were boxers trying to win. You had
yeah.
sumo wrestlers trying to
wrestling.
win. I mean, it was crazy. Like we had 300 pounders out there fighting guys that were 185 pounds, like running circles around trying to pop them in the head and just keep moving.
Yep.
And it was
Yeah.
just crazy. It was literally living out Street Fighter, the video game. It was like all these different
Yes.
characters from different
Yes.
countries with different techniques, and nobody knew who was going to win. And back then, even I saw it that wrestlers did pretty well and the jiu-jitsu guys did pretty well. But
Yep.
at that time, those guys didn't know how to strike. Like
Not at
nowadays,
all.
they all know how to strike. They're not just doing
Yes.
submissions. So it was cool to watch that whole thing, man, guys. And it was way more violent. If you're listening to this and you're in your 20s or your 30s right now, you probably didn't get to see the heyday of the UFC when it was super violent and there was really no rules except for eye gouging and
Right.
headbutts, I believe, and
Right.
craziness. Like,
Remember that one that I think it was UFC 2, 3, or 4, when like literally you're right. It was like you could no fish hooking, no eye gouging, and no biting. That was it.
that's
Everything
it.
else was fair game. And then this one guy, Joe Son, ends up pinned on his back, and the dude's just punching him in the balls like repeatedly. And they're like, okay, no groin strikes. I mean, literally, they had to add that in after like
Yeah.
the fourth tournament.
Yeah. It's crazy
Yeah,
how it
and
was. I mean,
it's just for context, because people may listen to this and go, okay, cool. Well, those are two martial artists talking about this stuff. It's for me the most attractive part and the most enduring lesson of all of that wasn't the violence necessarily, although that continues to be a relevant piece, but it was more so the distinction between theory and results. And I was also, when I was fighting, I was also in this huge existential crisis because, I was baptized Catholic, but we were never really that serious about it. And then, I like went to a Tony Robbins thing when I was like 20 years old. I was like, whoa, this is awesome. But then I'm like, studying Buddhism and reading Siddhartha. And I'm like, there's all this conflicting information. And then I had this street fight. And all of a sudden these philosophies collided in my experience, where martial arts has all these beautiful theories, most of which have never actually been tested. Personal development has all these wonderful theories and there's studies and science and practices and all of this, but it's like only results count. And I was very confused in my early 20s about a lot of things, but I was really like, what is the truth? Capital T, truth. Like, is there a God? Isn't there? If there is he a man with a beard? Is he passive aggressive like in the Old Testament? Or is he super loving like in the New Testament? Like, I don't know. And I realized that everybody feels that they know the truth. And if there's 8 something billion people in the world, how can everybody think the same thing about the same way about the same thing? And I realized that, oh, like I was seeking the truth, capital T, so that I wouldn't have to seek anymore. And then I realized, well, that's boring. Like, I don't ever want to have arrived at the capital T truth. So I was 21, 22 years old when I stopped asking what's true. Then I just started asking what's useful. And until I find a better paradigm than that, that's the one that I'll continue to use.
That's the level of awareness that I wish most people would be able to attain at some point. And I know it usually comes from age and wisdom and things like that, but I didn't really start having deeper thoughts until probably my late 30s. When you start to really question and look back and have reflection on your life and things that you could have done better, or, and you talked about building businesses and stuff pre-social. That was the same with me. I sold my first company in 2007. And at the time I was 34. There was no Facebook or Instagram. Like you said, we had to build these businesses organic through sweat equity and knocking doors and getting on actual phones that still had cords attached and doing those kind of things. And so,
Totally.
building community and running ads in print media and doing things that we can to grow these companies. And, nowadays it's so much easier with a cell phone and the entire world at our fingertips. And a lot of newer entrepreneurs kind of take it for granted because that's all they know. And rightfully so, they were the generation that grew up with a screen in their face the entire time. So they were actually,
Right.
attached to this device where you and I, we could likely just put our phones down and not even care. Like I don't ever have ringers on. I don't have notifications on. I don't look at the screen unless I decide I want to look at the screen. So I don't let my device kind of
Dude,
tether to me.
100%.
So many
It's
people
not
just
like you're
can't
going to
do it.
be sitting there. You're not going to be addicted to playing Snake on your Motorola Razor. It's
No.
like
Or
that's
your
not
Blackberry.
as sticky as Angry Birds or Facebook.
Yeah.
And it's you said something I think is really really important and really telling that when you were building your business and you did it old school, but because it wasn't old school, it was just how you did things. And people today are doing things how you do things. And one of the observations that I've made, and I'm curious if you've seen this as well, is that when things get easier, people get lazier,
Absolutely.
and when things get harder, people get it's like the whole fourth turning kind of thing, right? Strong men, weak
Mhm.
times, etc. But I remember when I made the shift into the wisdom economy, where I went from physically teaching classes, building my schools, and I'd figured out recruitment, enrollment, figured out teaching, retention, like the whole thing. And I built $1 million a year business in a pretty short period of time. And I realized that, wow, like I was studying Dan Kennedy and I was like, I would love to be able to teach this stuff and get paid doing it. But I'd never seen anybody that really, there was one guy who made it, but I didn't vibe with his ethics. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to write a letter and just sort of like channel my inner Dan Kennedy and see what I can do. And so I sat down and ended up writing what became this 18-page sales letter. It was the first sales letter I'd ever written in my life. Hand addressed it because I didn't have a printer. Found out later that is one of the best things you can do for conversion, but sent this letter to 70 or 80 people that I'd met through tournaments and conventions and different things, and got back 20 checks for $5,000
Wow.
and ran a 3-day training. And I was like, yes, please. Like, this is where it's at. And that was my first experience, but it was writing the letter because it really came from the heart. And I was just writing to me 3 years ago,
Yeah.
and ended up working. And even to this day, it's so weird, but I mean, I've had amazing clients. Russell Brunson messaged me a couple months ago, maybe a year ago, and he was like, "Hey man, like I'm ready to start working with you." And he sends me his email and he says, I was just talking to Dan Kennedy about you. And I was like, I had like a little, moment.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, I was talking to him about your parable, the lighthouse versus the tugboat. And Dan just paused for a minute and said, I would never come up with that on my own. And I'm having almost an out of body experience reading this because I'm like, the Dan Kennedy, like the dude that I first learned how to write copy from. It's like life is weird, man. And all I can say is like, I am so appreciative to have had that hunger early on. And I hope that I never ever feel like I've made it. Like half the time I still wake up in the morning, I'm like, man, do I really know this stuff? And it's like you ease your way back into
Yeah.
the connection with your audience and your clients and everything else. And I'm very, very appreciative of that.
Well, like earlier in a segment, you mentioned when you got into the space, the coaching space, personal development space, you wrongly assumed that everybody kind of had it figured out and they were all balling, behind closed doors. But isn't this always the situation? We always think that other people have the same knowledge or experience as us. We kind of take what we have, our experience, our results for granted, and we just assume everybody knows what we know. And so
Yeah.
we have this negative self-talk and why would they listen to me? Why would they buy my book? Why would they listen to my podcast? Like all this head trash to kind of go through. And I don't think that there's a way to learn your way through that until you kind of dabble and start to step into it a little bit more and start running full speed into it and get the result on the back end. So,
Yeah.
you talk about meeting people in the green room, and you and I both have had big speaking events, and it's really unfortunate when you meet people who are not the same in person. I think one of the highest compliments anybody could receive is that you're the same in person as you are online. You're the same as you are on YouTube. Like that is like we should be aligned like that. That should be who you are.
Right.
And
That shouldn't be a
if you're
shocking thing.
yeah, and dude, how many times have you been in the green room where maybe somebody shared the stage with you you really admired until you got to know them in the green room because maybe they came back there and were bragging about how many people they closed or how many programs they sold instead of actually thinking about, hey, I'm intentional to help people. That's the aftermath, or that's
Right.
the reality, the results from that. But when they're back there like, oh man, I got those people all wired up. You see them standing in the line in the back of the room and they're all hyped up about selling something. It's like, you're not here for the right reason. I really lose a lot of respect for people that do that.
Yeah. I appreciate that you said that. I think it's useful to be able to, and I think you're one of these people that you're going to get value no matter where you go. Like you could see a car accident and people could be spurting blood and first responders are there, and you're going to see lessons in that. You're going to expand as a man, as a human being, for having exposure to that experience, because my sense of you is that you alchemize very quickly and you upgrade on the fly. So you could be dropped into any environment, and within a very short period of time you'd be like thriving. And I think that experience of seeing someone who's different than maybe they were portraying themselves, I do think it's possible and useful to sort of cherry pick and go, okay, well, I like that aspect, and just like ignore everything else. It's like I was speaking a couple of years ago at Ryan Moran's event, before it became Capitalism Conference. It was Freedom Fastlane, and he asked me to open the thing. So I'm in the green room, and I rocked it out in the morning, started it out, and then I was hanging out in the middle of the day. Gary Vee walks in. Nobody else is in the green room. We sit down, we start chatting, and the dude was so present. And he was like asking me about the audience, and he's like, how's the vibe, and how are they feeling? What do you think they need, and how can I serve them? I was like, fuck, man, this is awesome. You are exactly who you act like.
That's right.
Fast forward, next day, I'm back in the green room again. There's a couple of people bouncing around, everybody's on their own. And this guy walks in, and he's like cursing, and he's on his phone. And he's like, God damn, I lost another $5,000. Sits down, puts his feet up. He's playing backgammon on his phone. It was Grant Cardone. Didn't talk to anybody, didn't care about talking to anybody, sitting here playing backgammon on his phone. And we chatted a little bit. I was like, I don't really want to chat with you.
Hey, you know what? He was still the same in person.
And that's the thing.
Yeah.
And that's exactly my point. Both of these people are authentic.
Yeah.
They're not pretending to be who they are. Who Grant is on stage and who he is backstage is the same dude. Who Gary is on stage and who he is off stage is the same person. And I actually trust that infinitely more
Yeah.
than somebody who's different, whether I personally vibe with them or not. You don't have to like everybody. I
Oh,
don't think you
absolutely.
should like everybody. But it's like, being like if somebody who says, "Well, I'm just not a selfish person. I'm an altruist." I'm like, I can't trust you. Like, there's not a person on this planet that doesn't do anything except for they think that they'll feel better by doing what they think is the right thing, which means they're putting their own feelings first. Like, and people, it's been schooled out, churched out, beat out of people that, you're not important. It's like, are you kidding? You are literally the most important part of your universe.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, I can echo the same thing about Gary Vee. I went to an event where he was one of the main headliners. He was the tail end of that. And there was a lot of big name speakers there, but he was actually the only one out of all of them that came out into the audience and hung out with some people and took some photos. And he's very present. He could have 100 people trying to get a selfie with him, but he'll have a one-on-one conversation one at a time. He's very patient. And he even like saw my wife holding her phone. He's like, "Hey, do you want to get a photo?" And he actually did the selfie for us. So it was like, I thought, man, that's pretty cool because he was very famous at the time and he's still doing it the right way. He didn't make himself unapproachable and like I'm better than you or escape out the back door. And I get it when sometimes we have to run after an event, but he made himself very present. And that was early on. That was probably 2017 when I saw that. And I was like, dude, that guy's doing it the right way. He's legit in person.
Yep. Yep. 100%.
Yeah.
And it's
And
so refreshing too. And I love your description of a compliment, that you're the same in person as you are, on stage or whatever. And I think there's so much freedom in that for people. And people do, back to your earlier observation that, people doubt themselves and they wonder, do I have anything to say? And you'll see someone's finished product and then compare, your starting point to their current point. And it's like, no, man, like every one of us is made unique and you're gonna suck at first. Like it's gonna be bad, but like get over that. Don't take it too serious. Don't take yourself too seriously. Take your work seriously. Don't take yourself too seriously. At the end of the day, nobody gets out of this life alive, so we might as well enjoy it. And my personal experience or philosophy is that birth is the finish line. You're born and it's like, yeah, now you're in the after party. You won. You won. You get a trophy. Here's your trophy. It's a body. Knock yourself out. You've already won. So just enjoy this bonus round.
so I want to go into some of the philosophy and the content creation that you've done because your message has reached millions of people. You've amassed hundreds and hundreds of thousands of followers on these different social platforms. So there has to be a formula or something that you're putting on there. And I get that we're touching about authenticity and just being different, but some of the things we learn in copywriting, like you talk about Dan Kennedy and the different tactics and the things to create an audience. I think that our audience here, listeners, want to know how to do these things from someone like yourself. So what are some of the things that you think about when you're thinking about content or how to resonate and grow these people to become in your audience?
Man, this is such a good question. And as you're asking it, like I can feel like in my body a little bit like tightening because the way that I do strategy is always in hindsight. There's rarely a strategy that I'm thinking about when I'm doing it, and that may not be good advice to follow. I've tried doing it differently, but I can't. The only way that I have been able to authentically and successfully create content is to share whatever is in my heart to share when it's on my heart to share it. And when I made my first video in 2013, it was terrible. I was like overthinking and stuttering and da da da. I was like, I got to get out of the way. So I posted it. The next day or 2 days later, I was on a coaching call with a client, and he was doing great. He was very happy. I was feeling awesome. And I just made this video. I just put my phone up and I just let it flow. And it felt so good, just like this. We're just having this natural conversation. I shared that video, and I had like 300 friends on Facebook. And that video in a couple of weeks ended up getting more shares than I had friends. And it was very encouraging. It was also very therapeutic because I was starting my life over again, 39 years old, no money, sold my business. The sale of the business went to go pay for a divorce that I didn't expect, kind of knew it was coming, but didn't plan for it. So it was very affirming. And I realized that was coming from just such a pure place. And I don't mean that to sound like morally superior or anything. It just felt like, oh, wow, this is what somebody needs to hear. And I'll grab my phone and make this video. And literally everything that I've done whether it's a post, Instagram, Facebook video, random webinars, whatever, has always come from that place of like, this just needs to be shared. And I have attempted to reverse engineer and to hit like certain points, but for me personally, it doesn't work. Like it's just always, it works better to just be, and I cringe a little at the term inflow because everybody talks about it, but everybody knows that space. Like there's that space when you just like, it's coming and it's like improv, you're just doing it. You're just performing philosophical, strategic, profitable improv, and you don't know what's going to come next. But that's also a natural result of nourishing yourself, both your physical capacity as well as the content that you're bringing in. Training jujitsu, playing piano, riding the motorcycle, working on my farm. I mean, these are all things that inform my life experience. And when I come to Facebook or make a post or video or whatever, that's like the proverbial overflow from all this other shit that's going so awesome in my life. And I think that's the difference. It's like, I'm not creating content so that I can feel successful, popular, whatever. Any popularity that I might have gained has come, as you said earlier about money, it's a natural byproduct of being yourself. But it's being yourself authentically and powerfully and clearly. And, it still cracks me up when I see people, making a video about authenticity, and they've got like the mic is hanging in the front and they're like, their makeup is perfect and they're just like one sleeve strategically rolled up. And it's like, this is your 37th take. Don't give me a video on authenticity.
Even to add a layer to that, even adding a layer of fakery to that. Nowadays, the trend is doing these reels with a microphone when you don't even have a show and you're not even being interviewed.
Are you serious?
Oh, dude, I've seen it. I've seen people like have a microphone like this and they'll just be, it's probably not even hooked up. Let's be real. They're probably filming it with their
probably
iPhone.
not. It's a prop.
But it's
a total prop.
To make people think that you're relevant and you're being interviewed or that you have some kind of show. And it's so fake.
It's like in Cialdini's book, Influence. Mm-hmm. And it's this click word, you see something that denotes authority and you just assume authority. Yeah. But I'm like legitimately, like I'm concerned and I'm excited. I'm concerned because there's a bulk of people out there who are they're already enamored with ChatGPT, and ChatGPT is writing their copy. We're very close, and some people already are using AI enhanced videos and photos, deep fake on their voices, and they're doing all of this stuff. And I'm concerned because like they're going to get smacked so hard when people realize at some point in the buying experience or in the service experience that this person that I bought from isn't the person that I'm working with.
Good point.
And, it's like, catfish, getting catfished on a dating app. You're like, whoa, that picture was from like 2001. And I think you've had 18 kids since then. And I didn't know you were missing 3 teeth. Interesting. What filter is that? And it's like, God bless people for trying to put themselves out there, but they're not putting themselves out there. They're putting something else out there.
Yeah, I don't even think about that perspective. Because what if you put out some brilliant copy, you seem really intellectual, your punctuation, your spelling is perfect, you're flowing, and you kind of entice people in through that marketing message, and then they do the one-on-one like this with the coaching, and you're kind of illiterate. They see your actual emails, and you can't spell anything. You can't even... Good old Zoom kicking me out right there.
The AI overlords are onto us, man. ChatGPT is like, don't talk.
We're talking trash about their cousin. See what happens? So, yeah, that's a good topic there about the AI. I mean, I love the technology. I think it's fascinating, but it also makes you think about, we're seeing like this really cool, really somewhat polished user interface. Makes me wonder how long it's existed in the background before they unveiled it to the general public. Like, how many years have they been using this,
Every time you watch the news or you watch politics, I think we're seeing the latest version.
Yeah. Well, I don't even know what version of Joe Biden we're on right now. I think 3 or 4 by now, 3 or 4.
I know, it's incredible. And so like I have concern for these people because I just know what's coming. And even if it never smacks them, even if they continue to make sales and keep expanding and scaling, it's like what that does to your soul when you know how disingenuous you are and people love you, but they don't actually love you like that. I mean, people kill themselves
Yeah.
because of that rift in their integrity. And so I have a genuine concern for people who are relying on all these, polished external amplifiers instead of just being real. But I'm mostly excited because, everybody that's in my world and people that I'm connected with and people that I'm hanging out with and people that I have the honor of coaching and guiding, they're real as fuck. Like they are just the real deal.
Yeah.
And they're raw, they're human. They're not like this, super woke and broke, like overly sharing, like I have a vulnerable share, guys. It's like, yeah, your connection goes up, your credibility plummets. So it's like the people that I get to hang out with, they've really got it dialed in. And that's what I'm excited about. And the thing is, and I think you believe this as well, everybody's got that inside.
Everybody.
You just, nobody's going to give you permission. You are the only one that can give yourself permission to go out there, make mistakes with a smile on your face, and just stumble into whatever the best next thing is. And I mean, that's all I did in 2013. I had 2 clients. I ended up going to Yannick's Underground in DC. Saw this guy give a great speech, ended up hanging out and talking with him at the bar afterwards. We really connected. A couple of weeks later, he is messaging me. He's like, hey man, I got some questions. And we ended up working together. You'll appreciate this. Literally a couple months ago, he sent me this video. I thought it was so cool. But this is an accident.
Oh, it's crazy, dude. Almost a decade ago, you were working with me. Now, look at this. Look at this. $22 million home on the beach, bro. 2 massive brands, 5 kids, and a life. That day sitting on the picnic benches with you or wherever the hell we were, you changed my life, man. You changed my life for the entire time we worked together. It's the most profound and impactful games. You want to look at this, you launched me and you launched Sean Whalen. It's fucking incredible, dude. Look at the impact you made from it. I'm sure you just launched 1,000 people in between. No, I love you, man. We'll miss you. And excited to come out to the farm in 2023. Get to experience it. Have some eggs with you or whatever it is we do on a farm. Love you, bro.
Yeah. I mean, that's the great testimonial right there. He's blown it up and he really became like the ClickFunnels dude. And yeah.
100%. And he's like he's the great white shark in the men's coaching space.
Yeah.
And my relationship with him was purely divine. Like I didn't intend to do it. Even when he flew to San Antonio, we spent the first couple of days together. I didn't perceive that he's going to be a client, but I said some things that he needed to hear when he needed to hear them. He said, how do we do this more? I'm like, well, I guess we just do it like this. And so the moral of that, or the point that I continue to refer to, and I hope is useful for people listening and watching this, is that like we're the surfer, but we're not the wave. And we can control everything on the board, but life is the wave. And life is trying to expand. Life wants to expand. Life is constantly becoming more. And if we just don't resist that, you'll be blessed and gifted with so many insights and ideas and energy to execute on those ideas. And you will have no resistance in your life. You will live a truly friction-free life. And then the only resistance will come because you keep challenging yourself to do more and better and better. But life wants to partner with us. And it's only when we get all up in our heads and we become super overly rational that we disconnect from our intuition. But I think logic is an app, but it's not the OS.
I love it, man. And those of you guys that weren't familiar with that voice that you heard, that you're hearing this on the podcast, that was Garrett J. White. And he's built a very huge organization of coaching men to become more alpha and more dominant, more assertive, more confident. So he's been doing it for quite a while, several years now. And he is one of the big icons of this industry. So, kudos to you for being one of the men behind the men, but you've built some big names in the past few years. So it's cool. We never know how our clients are going to turn out. I've definitely built some clients that have exceeded my own expectations and also, surpassed my own. And that's how we should be. When we're coaching, we're not trying to build people up to the limit that we've created for ourselves. We're always trying to get them to find their own limits and go explore those kind of things. And let's finish with that segment, because you're talking about mostly helping people find their identity and their purpose. And I know that we had some, nuggets dropped in the episode about that right now, but what is the methodology of having to identify what a person's purpose is? Because it's a really big question and everybody's got a different answer, but how do you dig in to help them find what that is?
Yeah, this is so big. I'll preface it by saying that I think it's pretty obvious that there are no lies in nature. You know, there's no lies in nature. Everything in nature operates in perfect harmony. In our finite human perspective, it can look like chaos, but it's perfect. You know, the volcanic eruptions, that's the earth, like, you know, farting or something. You know, there's like tectonic shifts, that's like the earth's chiropractic adjustment. Like, it's just always changing. And so there are no lies in nature. Everything in nature has a function, and its function is a natural byproduct of its existence. And so, you know, I look outside and there's these trees, and the trees, like, that's a hackberry tree. It's not going to wake up tomorrow and go, I don't want to be a hackberry, I want to be a pecan tree. It's like, no, you're a hackberry, so be a hackberry. And then there's an oak tree over there, and there is some bamboo over there. Each one of those different plants is exactly what it is. And as a result of it being what it is, it has these functions that just happen automatically, like harvesting sunlight, expressing oxygen, fixing the soil with nitrogen, being a home for a bird. I mean, these are all natural functions of its existence. I can't imagine that there's a tree or any other part of nature that, if it has a consciousness, which probably it does, I can't imagine it like the sun saying, oh, I got to do better. I gotta feed more planets. Like, the sun doesn't have a fucking quota. The sun just exists. And as a result of its existence, it has this byproduct called heat and light. And then out of all of the light that the sun shines, this tiny little pixel ends up on this place that we call Earth. And as a result of that, there's photosynthesis and life, and that's great. But if the Earth ceased to exist today, it's not like the sun would be like, oh, thank God, oh, what a drag, what a drain. Yeah. Like, it's literally indifferent.
Yeah.
The existence of the Earth and all the life that happens on the planet is completely, has nothing to do, it's meaningless to the sun. And now, I'm not suggesting that we don't care about our clients or don't care about our people in our life, but I'm saying that every human being has a unique function. And as a natural byproduct of your function and you being who and what you are, there's all these radiant byproducts. Like, I never set out to be a coach. I still cringe a little bit at the term. I just am a curious homeschooled kid from South Texas who is extremely restless, bored super easily, and was struggling with so much of my own stuff and obsessed over how to figure it out in a way that felt right to me. And as a very happy accident, turned out I'm really great at teaching people how to make money. And I'm really great at teaching people how to be happier making money. And so a business developed very accidentally. But dude, I could walk away from coaching today and be delighted, because that doesn't define me. It's a useful interface with other people to help them solve problems. But like, its purpose is not something we have to achieve. It's what you are. And you either are allowing yourself to be who and what you are, or you're restricting yourself from being who and what you are. And it's beyond the scope of this dialogue, but most of what people believe about themselves has come from the lens of the other people who didn't know who they were. So there's all this projection and co-projection and reflection and just like emotional bartering. The sovereign individual is the person who can say, I don't care what you think about me. I care about you as a fellow being on this planet. Like, I recognize the consciousness that you are, and that's awesome. And maybe we'll resonate, maybe we won't. Neither of those is going to change my life. And many people hear something like that. It's like, oh, you don't care. It's like, well, you could look at it that way. Or it's like, I care so much about you that I'm only going to bring to you what's real. And the reality is, like, if I tell somebody I love you, Ayn Rand put it really, really great. In order to say I love you, one must first be able to say the I. So like, who is the I that's saying I love you? And if I say that I'm in love with you, well, that's like being in the ocean together. I'm in the ocean, you're in the ocean. Isn't this awesome? I'm in the ocean with you. But if you get out of the ocean, I'm still in the ocean. If I get out of the ocean, you're still in the ocean. Another human being is not the source of love. Humans are reflectors and amplifiers and generators and receivers of love, but not the source of love. We're just a conduit for love. Love is a frequency. And so same thing with purpose. So if somebody wants to know their purpose, first thing is don't treat it like an outcome that you arrive to. It's a state of being. Then just write down, this is really simple, too simple, most people won't do it. But you just write down, I want to know what my purpose is. And you just write that down and look at it and just stare at it until the words sort of melt and you start to wonder what are even words. Like, keep your focus on it. And something will crack inside of you. Something will pop. There will be some little remembrance, some awareness, and maybe you'll get an idea of an action, and your purpose will be an action orientation. Maybe it will be an identity orientation. Like I'm going to be a mom. I'm going to be a dad. I'm going to be a writer. But those are all like the gift wrap of your purpose. Your purpose itself, I think, is probably indefinable.
Thank you for that. That was a very deep response from a deep question, and that's really matching the energies. And I really appreciate that perspective on that. And it really ties back into when I asked you earlier about the content creation, the strategy, and the way you explained it. No one has ever said that, but that's exactly how I feel, right? We are in the moment. And I got really good at about 3 years ago capturing the moment of that emotion and that thought and not just putting it off, because a lot of you guys listening to this, you'll have a brilliant thought about a piece of content that you either want to write or create a video, and you go, you know what, I don't have time to do it right now. I'll do it later. I'll do it when I get home. But what happens is then you have all the negative self-talk, and then you start talking yourself out of it. You go, oh, it's probably not that good of an idea. And I don't know. Maybe I don't know if I really believe that right now. And your emotion is in a different state, and maybe something else gets you distracted, so you don't record that content in any way. And so when I think about these thoughts that we have, I do agree that if you're not feeding your brain with new information on a daily basis or new discoveries, you're going to have like this lull of lack of creativity. But if you're always feeding your brain new experiences, new challenges, new green light, like you said, chasing fears like I do and you do, then you're always going to have content, but you have to be really good at capturing it in the moment. And if you let that moment fleet and go away, the universe is going to conspire to give that thought to somebody else. They're going to post it, and they're probably going to get the rewards for that. So I think spiritually, our thoughts, like you said, you're a conduit, a receiver. I don't know where thoughts originate from. We're electrical impulses, but where are they coming from? So sometimes those thoughts that are bestowed upon us are from a thing that we can't explain. And how dare us, how dare you, how dare me to not be able to communicate those impulses and those thoughts that we need to be putting out there. And the more you do this, the easier it gets. And you start to realize, like, I have some really wacky thoughts. Sometimes I look back at my old content a couple of years back, and it's like, man, I had some really wacky thoughts, but I'm still intrigued by them, and I think that's what people want to see. So great conversation, brother. I love this conversation, 100%. Man. I love this.
Likewise, Tony. And I think you just said it spot on. And I know everybody heard it, but you guys should go back and listen to what Tony said about when that moment arrives, and it is fleeting, and it's what you do with that signal that makes all the difference between success and struggle. Receiving the signal and acting on it specifically in a way that it affects other people. Maybe the way I learned to make videos was teaching 40,000 martial arts classes and learning to speak and animated and all this stuff. But I also would send videos to friends of mine, and we'd like try and one up each other, and like, who can be the grossest, the most crude, the funniest, all of this, who's got the coolest background. So we were just like, when the iPhone first came out and first could send video, that's what we were doing. So there's that, and then Facebook video. So it was like this, kind of herky jerky path. And all you have is whatever's the best next step. That's why building a 48 step strategy, it's like, by the time you get to 12, you're not going to be anywhere near the person you are today. So how about like just the next one and maximize the hell out of it. And then from that, you get the wins, the confidence. It's like Pac-Man running from the ghosts. All of a sudden you hit a power up. Now the ghosts turn blue and you bust their ass, and then they become your food. And that's fear. Fear is the ghosts. So you hit a power up every time that thought comes in and you take action on it. That's a power up. You expand, you become more. Now all the fears turn blue. So if you guys listening to this, watching this, go back and hear what Tony said about those fleeting moments, because that's literally everything.
Man, I love it. So here we are at the end of the episode, wrapping up on time, man. I really appreciate the hour that you spent with me and my listeners. And if people wanted to find you in this world, what's the best way for them to do so?
Let's see. Facebook and Instagram are pretty good places. Instagram is Time Piercer, and Facebook, Jesse Elder. And those are the most active places currently.
There you go. And you guys, if you're not following him, definitely follow him, especially on Facebook. He's very active there most of the time, putting out this content. And a lot of people get enraged with some of the things he puts out there, but he's very good at using selective words and understanding he believes what he's posting. And again, I don't really think he does care what people think if he really believes the content he's putting out there. And I'm the same way. You guys follow me, I'm the same way. But it's a great episode, and I'm glad to finally connect with you. And we're going to have to meet up sometime. We're both in Texas. I'm in Houston myself, and I look forward to that day.
Nice. Likewise, Tony. Appreciate this, man. We'll do this again sometime.
Thank you for being on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you.